Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
We've survived.
We've survived the polar vortex, yes.
I went someplace that we are not just, surviving it. It has attacked us. It's not just made a visit. We've been attacked and we have survived the polar vortex. So I feel good about that. So the Eastside Freedom Library, tell me what's all happening there. And for the audience members who have not listened in on the first Saturday of the month, give them a little overview about all the good things that you do at the Eastside Freedom Library.
Well, I think the broad theme for the month is connecting to Black History Month and the idea of activist scholarship. So how do we produce new knowledge? How do we bring people together to tell their stories and listen to each other's stories? And this month, a real central theme for this work for us is the theme of home. Many people who live on the east side of St. Paul have left other homes to come here. And they have invested a great deal of time, energy, and resources to create new homes for themselves. So we've had the wonderful opportunity to work with a number of organizations and communities. And today on the show, we want to talk particularly about our work with the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra and our work with the Twin Cities Japanese American Citizens League on the ways that people have both left home, recreated home, and have found ways to use art to talk about what home means to them, giving us the opportunity to reflect on what home means to us and what kind of home we would really like to live in.
Art allows us to create a sense of home too. Not only does it reflect it, it can be a way of challenging us to see in what ways are we alike, in what ways are we not, in what ways do we want to create a sense of family. I think of family of home. I also think of where I live as a broader community of home and family. And how does the us and them become an us in a sense of home?
And I think that we're still discovering, after 5 years at the Eastside Freedom Library, that our neighborhood consists of many, many different people who have had complex experiences of being wrenched out of the homes that their families had lived in for generations, beginning with Dakota people who lived for thousands of years where we live now, and then right up until our most recent neighbors from Burma and Somalia and Ethiopia who are just beginning to establish themselves. And we're convinced that if people can share those stories with each other, they can discover how to work together to build a home that all of us can be more fulfilled in.
I also like how the Eastside Freedom Library helps us with our own self-awareness. It's telling our own story and understanding our own story, then to be able to understand someone else's story. And I think we have to do our work of figuring out who we are and be able to make healthy connections to others and having empathy or opening ourselves to reimagine the world from different perspectives.
Absolutely. And I think that too many of us were raised simply to be white and not to think about the specificities of where our ancestors might have come from and what experience they had had, and about the complicated contradictions of both having a family that had left somewhere else and yet came to a place where either they had access to land because Native Americans had been expropriated and pushed away, or farms in California that Japanese Americans had been, again, expropriated and moved away. So that combination of expropriation and privilege, how do we understand who we are, and how can we be responsible neighbors for the people who live with us?
As I have shared and have been shared with me, you're either an immigrant, a refugee, or you're, indigenous. And, if you're not indigenous,
something specific.
Yes.
But you're something specific.
Yes, but we can tend to move into this is mine, not yours. This is, and we all need to grapple with what is home and who are we and who are we creating as home. So wonderful. I'm looking forward to today's discussion. Would you like to introduce our guest today?
Sure. So I'm very happy today that joining us are Paul Finkelstein, who is himself a tuba player and is the artistic planning manager for the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra. And I've gotten to know Paul through working on this project that he's going to talk about this morning. And Karen Tanaka-Lucas, who is with the Twin Cities Japanese American Citizens League. We're very honored at the Eastside Freedom Library that they recently chose to give us their library. And you can actually search our website to find an annotated bibliography of the collections that were in the Twin Cities Japanese American Citizen League. And Karen works with the education committee there as well, and we're developing programming. There will be 2 examples of that in this coming month, but we intend to continue to do more programming as our Dakota friends would say, with our relatives at the Twin Cities Japanese American Citizens League.
I love that your library keeps growing.
Yes.
It's one of those,
Well,
it seems like every time I see it, well, we got this new collection. We had this just donated.
Yeah.
So it becomes a place that everyone can celebrate and donate and really good pieces to enrich our sense of knowing each other.
Right.
And sharing our work.
This past month in January, because we were gifted a first edition of Langston Hughes's The First Story of Jazz, which was published in 1955, that it inspired us to pull a bunch of books and to create a display of books about the history of African American and Black diasporic music and how that related to musical concerts that we were having.
And on the
one book.
And on the theme of music, let's hear from Paul. Tell us about this wonderful work that you're doing with the SPCO, the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra.
Sure. Thank you so much, Lori and Peter, for having me here today and for letting us talk a little bit about some of the exciting stuff going on in February. In particular, the way we came to the Eastside Freedom Library was through a new festival that the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra has been working on. It's called Tapestry. Now, the idea of behind this Tapestry Festival, which we hope will be a biennial festival that will happen every 2 years, is to explore an important issue facing our community. And one that we hope we can engage our community members in discussing, and particularly through the lens of music, and by working with a group of diverse composers, both local, national, international, internationally known, on this theme. And so in February, starting February 11th and running through February 24th, the SPCO has a series of events, mostly that are concert-based, that will be exploring the theme for this year's festival, which is home, and how we recognize home in particular in the 21st century, which happened to align really well with what the Eastside Freedom Library has been working on, and some of the other broader themes that they work on as an organization.
And this will also culminate at a program at the Ordway?
Correct. There's actually 2 primary concert programs that will happen over the course of 2 weekends. The first is over the weekend of February 15 through 17, and that involves 2 concerts at the Ordway and 1 at Bethel University. And then the second weekend of concerts is February 22nd to 24th, and all 3 of those concerts will be at the Ordway. And the concerts that are happening at the Ordway on the 22nd through the 24th is where we'll be premiering a brand new work by our composer in residence, Lembit Beecher, called Say Home. And Say Home involved collaborating with partners all around the Twin Cities to collect interviews on this topic of home and what home means to us and how that may have changed throughout our lives, if it's a static definition, if it's something that grows over time. And we interviewed folks at the American Swedish Institute, at Wellstone International High School in Minneapolis, which is a high school for primarily consists of English language learners who are recent immigrants to the United States. We interviewed folks in the Mille Lacs Band Urban Office in Minneapolis. And one of the other big partnerships we had was with the Eastside Freedom Library, where we interviewed about a dozen folks for this project.
And in our next segment, I want to find out more about what some of those conversations were all about. For more information, also on the Eastside Freedom Library, see all the terrific dates coming up, you can go to the eastsidefreedomlibrary.org. Also want to put a pitch in for Brunson's Pub. Talk about home. That celebrates home of the East Side. And we love Brunson's Pub. They are a sponsor of our show, and we want to do a great big shout out and encourage you all to take a look. Go in and have a beer and a brat. They've got great food, which also celebrates the East Side cuisine, too. And while you're at looking at all these things on the website, check us out too at connectionsradiomn.com or go to Facebook and give us a like. We'll be right back after a few announcements, and then we'll hear more about the conversations on home. You're listening to AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota.
While I'm pregnant, I can keep our baby safe by not drinking, smoking, or using drugs. But how are we going to keep her safe after she's born?
When I grow up, I look forward to dancing in powwows, going to college, and being successful. But I don't want to be one out of 3 American Indian women to be raped or sexually assaulted in her lifetime.
As relatives and friends of Native women, it is our responsibility to stand up and speak out for every woman's right to be safe in her home and the community.
Sponsored by the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition.
Located just north of 50th in France, the Great Wall Restaurant has provided a delicious taste of authentic Chinese cuisine since 1981. Specializing in Szechuan and Peking dishes, they offer one of the most extensive menus in the Twin Cities. Favorites include hot and sour soup, pan-fried dumplings, and mushu pork with homemade Chinese pancakes. Stop by their Edina location or call for takeout at 952-927-4439. See the full menu at greatwallrestaurant.us.
Fearless 5 Noir. 5 original short plays by 5 different writers and 5 directors, all on the same topic, noir. Follow these clues. St. Paul, Fridays and Saturdays, February 8th through the 23rd at 7:30 p.m. Tickets $10 if you gumshoe to the website and order at fearlesscomedyproductions.com. Or a deal at $15 at the door. Fearless 5 Noir on February 8th through the 23rd at 7:30 p.m. at the Mounds Theater, presented by Fearless Comedy Productions.
Hi, this is Paul Metza inviting you to listen to a great new episode on the Wall of Power Radio Hour this weekend. We feature great rock and roller, Iron Ranger, and composer, bandleader, and cool cat Rich Manson with his new record by Rich Manson and the North Stars called Totem. We talk about the Iron Range, South Minneapolis, and the rock and roll scene in the mid-'80s, and where Rich is going from here. Saturday at 6 p.m., Sunday at 4 p.m. on AM 950.
Native Roots Radio is proud to announce we've added an extra hour.
Yeah, Chushke, 1 hour goes by too fast.
That's right, Uncle Curtis.
I'll have extra time to share important information about our secret animals.
And report national and native news from all over the country and Canada.
This new hour is sponsored by Robbins Kaplan, LLP, rewriting the odds for their clients for over 80 years.
We are awake.
Brighten your winter with an optimistic tribute to the invincible human spirit. Girl Friday Productions presents Thornton Wilder's Pulitzer Prize-winning classic, The Skin of Our Teeth. The Skin of Our Teeth plays February 7th through March 3rd. Fresh, unexpected, and very funny, this tale is surprisingly relevant for today. Follow the trials of an eternal American family residing in prehistoric and contemporary New Jersey. They survived the Ice Age, the Great Flood, World War, and family strife, all with their hope intact. Joel Sass directs this large cast production on stage at Park Square Theater. The Skin of Our Teeth previews begin February 7th with opening night February 9th. Don't miss The Skin of Our Teeth, a comedy of epic proportions. Oh, did we mention the dinosaur? Visit parksquaretheater.org for tickets.
Welcome back to Connections Radio Show. We're glad you joined the conversation today and are making the connection. I'm Lori Fitz, your host. And this week is the first week of the month, so that means it's the Eastside Freedom Library Show. And I have Peter Ratcliffe, who is the co-executive director and who is the grand poobah of the Eastside Event Management, along with his lovely co-executive director, who is also my co-host today. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Lori, and hi to everybody out there.
And Peter, we've been talking about home.
Yes, and talking about how diverse people use diverse arts as a way to reflect on home and share their stories on home. And we've been very fortunate to be in a relationship with the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra and their project, Tapestry, and the very specific project of the composition Say Home by the child of Estonian immigrants, Lembit Beecher, who has done a remarkable job of interviewing more than 50 Twin Cityans, including about a dozen at the Eastside Freedom Library, people from very different backgrounds, including myself, about what home has meant to us. And we're all, I think, dying to hear how that gets incorporated into a new piece of music. So here to tell us about that is Paul Finkelstein, who's been the key person in this St. Paul Chamber Orchestra project.
And you are the artistic planning manager, I understand.
Correct.
So in your planning, you've had conversations.
Yes, we've had lots of conversations, both broadly in connection to this festival, but of course specifically for this really fascinating piece of music that'll premiere February 22nd to 24th. I actually in the last few days have been listening back to many of these interviews, and just so our listening audience has some frame of reference, these 50 interviews made up about 27 hours of audio that we collected. And Lembit's challenge as the composer of this piece was to take those 27 hours of interviews and whittle it down into 35 minutes of orchestral music. And you might be wondering, how exactly do you work in these audio interviews into a piece of orchestral music? And Lembit actually has a really amazing background as a composer in terms of writing pieces of a documentary nature, works where he's interviewed his grandmother, and particularly talking about his Estonian heritage, and then weaving it that the recorded material into an acoustic, orchestral, or chamber music texture. It's a very, very difficult technique to accomplish because, of course, as a listener, when we hear people speaking, our desire is to understand every last word that's being said. And the challenge that Lembit has with this piece is to both find meaning in the words that people are saying about home, and to draw themes and connections or even disagreements between the things that people said during these interviews, but also to draw meaning out of the music, but without also misappropriating people's words in the process. So this is a very difficult task for him to do.
Now, did he compose the music after the interviews, or was the music with him and then he has found a marriage between the music that he created with the words that
That's a really great question. He wrote everything after hearing all the interviews. He did not want to superimpose his own opinions about what home meant to him. He really wanted it to be a reflection of these 50 interviews and to see what the community here in the Twin Cities, what people said who are at different stages in their lives in the Twin Cities, folks who have been here, who just I think the most recent immigrant we interviewed had lived in Minnesota for like 3 weeks or a month.
Oh my goodness!
And then of course stretching to folks who've been here for 1 generation, 2 generations, and of course here in the Twin Cities we also have people who feel strongly about the Scandinavian roots of the Twin Cities, and then of course we also got to interview folks from Ojibwe backgrounds who've been here for hundreds of generations, well surpassing most of us. So getting to hear so many different diverse perspectives on home is 100% what informed how he would write the music at the end.
So, one thing to think of is it's going to be great to hear the music itself, knowing this about how it was created. Secondly, Paul has just informed us that there will be podcasts on the SPCO website in which some of the more extended raw interview material will be available for people to listen to. And the Eastside Freedom Library and SPCO are collaborating on 2 events in this month of February that will both introduce people to this material and give them an opportunity to engage with it and bring their own experiences to bear. So, Paul, do you want to say a bit about these 2 events that we have coming up at the library?
Sure, yeah. The first event is going to be on February 17th, which I believe is a Sunday evening at 7 p.m., and that's going to be a panel discussion diving deeper into the process of writing Lembit's piece, Say Home. And it's a really rich panel consisting not only of Lembit, but also two other partners who I wanted to give a shout out to. The first, both are actually professors at the University of St. Thomas, but the first is Professor Chris Santiago, who's a poet of Filipino descent. And we commissioned Chris to write poetry. And it was kind of the second part of this piece, Say Home, was that we wanted to ask each of the interviewees for Lembit's piece to read this poem that Chris wrote. That's a really amazing poem that touches on many of the definitions that we ended up learning about from all of our interviewees, whether home has to do with people or home has to do with land or place or movement or migration. Chris hit on so many of these themes in this poem, and it kind of served as an icebreaker during our interview process. And so that poem and the reading of the poem is worked into Lembit's piece in multiple segments of it. So we'll have Chris on the panel as well, and then the moderator for the panel will be Professor Todd Lawrence, who's also on the board at the Eastside Freedom Library. Now, Todd works as an ethnographer through his research, and so Todd was kind of the point person who helped us develop the script that we would use for our interviews, and so Todd is going to be leading this panel discussion with Chris and Lembit, as well as a group of about 4 of the interviewees from the Eastside Freedom Library.
And will the poem be read?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, Chris will be reading the poem that evening.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So that's on Sunday night, the 17th, and then in the middle of the week on the 19th, we'll have a second event, which we should talk about after the break.
Yes,
okay.
The next segment. So we're going to leave a little cliffhanger for folks.
Great.
So stay tuned. You got to hear what's going to happen on the 19th, or you can sneak a peek by going to the eastsidefreedomlibrary.org and go to the calendar for February. Also want to put a plug in while you're down at the Eastside Freedom Library. Go to Brunson's Pub, wonderful place. Brunson'sPub.com. A great place to eat, a great place to bring your friends and family, and of course, check us out on our website as well, and it's connectionsradiomn.com.
It was a day like any other when she walked into my office and told me about Fearless 5 Noir, a collection of 5 original short plays by 5 different writers and 5 directors, all on the same topic, noir. It just sounded so crazy that it was a hard pill to swallow, even for a hard-boiled detective like me. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I knew exactly where I could find them, too. They'd be at the Mounds Theater at 1029 Hudson Road in St. Paul. They'd be there Fridays and Saturdays, February 8th through the 23rd at 7:30 p.m. Tickets would be $10 if I planned ahead and ordered them online, or $15 at the door. She told me that I could always find more information at fearlesscomedyproductions.com. I took the job, but are you up for helping me with this case? I guess we'll find out at Fearless 5 Noir on February 8th through the 23rd at 7:30 p.m. at the Mounds Theater. Presented by Fearless Comedy Productions.
This is New Beginnings, hosted by award-winning broadcaster and speaker Freddie Bell.
Freddie, this generation of the baby boomers, people are living longer, so the baby boomers are taking care of elderly parents.
Let's talk about your health, and specifically, let's talk about Medicare. Our show features the concerns of America's 78 million baby boomers in employment, finance, health and nutrition, and even entertainment.
Catch New Beginnings with Freddie Bell, Saturdays at 11 on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota.
I'm Peter Ratcliffe from the Eastside Freedom Library, and I'd like to tell you about an historic place on Payne Avenue, Brunson's Pub. Experience history and passion through the delicious menu, reflecting the East Side's diversity. The choices are limitless: salads, sandwiches, burgers, and shareable plates. Visit Brunson's Pub at 956 Payne Avenue and grab a discounted gift card when you mention that you're an AM 950 listener or a supporter of the Eastside Freedom Library. Be sure to check out brunsonspub.com.
The stage is set with a motionless tableau, the actors frozen in mid-action, their faces conjuring up an ancient frieze. At the snap of fingers, the spell is broken. The statues spring to life and Antigone begins. Park Square Theater presents Antigone on stage February 1st through March 3rd. A reimagined adaptation of this classic Greek drama explores civil disobedience, fidelity, and a family torn apart by pride. This electric production brings the action directly on stage with an all-female cast playing the roles. The battles between the laws of the gods and the laws of the people rages. Who is right when all are certain? What are you willing to die for? Be a part of this epic event at Park Square Theater in St. Paul. Tickets and more at parksquaretheater.org. That's parksquaretheater.org.
With your AM 950 weather, I'm Hunter Haas. Saturday, mostly cloudy with a high near 38. Sunday, mostly cloudy with a high near 37. And Monday, snow with the temperature falling to 14. This week's EatLocalMinnesota.com restaurant of the week is Milda's Cafe. They're a family restaurant with home-cooked breakfast and lunch, fresh omelets, hash browns, and cinnamon caramel rolls. Located at 1720 Glenwood Avenue in Minneapolis, just east of Penn. Find out more at EatLocalMinnesota.com.
Radio show. I'm Lori Fitz, your host, and we talk about ideas that matter. And this month, we're talking about the home, and it's brought to us by the Eastside Freedom Library. Yes, it's the first Saturday of the month, and we always enjoy having our partner, the Eastside Freedom Library, join us. And Peter Ratcliffe, who is the co-executive director of the Eastside Freedom Library, is also the co-host today.
And I really enjoy being here, too, and the opportunity to reach out and let more people know about what's going on the east side of St. Paul.
What I like is it allows us to amplify what you're doing in the east side. It allows us to share with so many more the good things that you're doing. I'm hoping that folks get inspired and are
on over.
Learn about the east side and join the activities. There's art, there's political discussions, there's library to research, and it's a fun place to go to. But it also, if you don't make it, you've at least gotten a little taste of it through our radio show. And when we do go down, and I'm encouraging you at least to go down to some of the events, take a look at the calendar, see if there's something that sparks your interest. When you do go to the Brunson's Pub, it's a place where history and passion are part of every detail, starting with the menu, which is inspired by the neighborhood. So when you experience the Brunson's Pub, you're going to have a great time. It's at 956 Payne Avenue. You can also get a discounted gift card if you mention that you're an AM 950 listener, or if you're a supporter of the Eastside Freedom Library. So give us a shout out, and you'll get a discount on your wonderful special discounted gift card.
Great. So where we left off at the end of the last segment, Paul and I were just beginning to talk about this event that brings the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra and the Eastside Freedom Library together on the 19th of February, called Many Threads, Weaving a Path Home. It's a riff on the tapestry theme of this series that St. Paul Chamber Orchestra are doing. And it's a chance to hear from artists in the community who are using different art forms to explore the meaning of home. So, Paul, do you want to say a little more about that?
Yeah, that's right, Peter. One of the primary tenets of this festival that we were creating, Tapestry, was to engage local artists and our community members on this theme, and to really give them literally a stage to discuss this theme, so that us, the lucky listeners or viewers of their artwork, could ponder more deeply on the theme of this festival, which, as we've mentioned in the last segment, is home and how we recognize it. So simply what we did was the SPCO and the Eastside Freedom Library, we put our heads together to curate a group of performers and artists to respond to the theme of this festival, and those are the different threads that we'll be weaving that evening. So we have a group of a few SPCO musicians who will be performing works that evening that for them represent either home or even their musical home, and then we have a group of about 6 performers from around the Twin Cities, a really amazing group that includes poets, spoken word artists, photographers, and musicians as well, to speak to this theme.
Right. Yeah, so that's Tuesday night, the 19th of February at 7 at the Eastside Freedom Library, so please get this on your calendars. I want to mention one of those artists is a young Amharic Ethiopian woman, Yodit Makuria, who came to us with a group of Ethiopians that we're hosting called Rhythmic Literature on the first Saturday of every other month. We will next be with them on the first Saturday in March. And Yodit came to the last program and read a poem that she had written called Rethinking Home. And the poem was in Amharic. We're hoping to have an English translation to go along with it. But we're very excited for her to be part of the program. And one of the artists who will be there is John Matsunaga, who is a brilliant Japanese-American photographer and an activist with the Twin Cities Japanese-American Citizens League, and someone who's teaching in Asian American Studies at the University of Minnesota. And so today we're fortunate to also have with us in the studio Karen Tanaka-Lucas, who is on the board of the Twin Cities Japanese-American Citizens League and part of their education committee. And Karen is here to tell us a bit about both their involvement with this event on the 19th, and then a standalone event that we're doing with them on Saturday night, the 23rd, around the concept of the Day of Remembrance. So good morning, Karen.
Good morning, and thank you, Lori and Peter, for having me here today.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit more about the Japanese Citizen League.
The Japanese American Citizens League is the oldest and largest Asian American organization for civil rights in the United States, and it was founded in 1929. The Twin Cities chapter, which is what we are part of, was founded in 1946 and is one of over 100 chapters across the country. The mission of the JACL is to secure and maintain the civil rights of Japanese Americans and all others who are victimized by injustice and bigotry and hate crimes. So this includes partnering with our Asian American neighbors, or with our Muslim American neighbors who are experiencing ethnic and religious targeting in our current political climate.
You have your community, your culture has experienced that in our country. We have we have many scars
Yes.
that need to be not forgotten, but healed and then reached out to others. So the Day of Remembrance, this is a powerful time. Tell us about that.
Yes, February 19th, 1942 was the day that President Roosevelt signed an executive order which put into effect the forced removal and incarceration of all Japanese Americans on the West Coast. They were sent to incarceration camps scattered in desolate, remote regions of the country. The majority of these 120,000 people, 2/3, were American citizens. No Japanese American was ever charged, much less convicted, of espionage or sabotage against the United States, which was the concern and justification for the incarceration. They were imprisoned without charges and without trials for over 3.5 years on the basis of ethnicity. And every February, the Japanese American community commemorates Executive Order 9066 as a reminder of the impact the incarceration experience has had on our families, our community, and our country. It's an opportunity to educate others on the fragility of civil rights in times of crisis and the importance of remaining vigilant in protecting the rights and freedoms of all.
When people are afraid, terrible things can happen if we don't have a cooler head. Even in our conversation before the radio show started, oh yes, internment camps, and you helped me understand that that's a language that needs to change too.
Right. The euphemism used at that time was that the Japanese were evacuated. And
it has a nice protective sense
right,
to it.
Right, and they were put in internment, and this was for their own protection. When in reality, this was forced evacuation at gunpoint, oftentimes with a day or two, or maybe, if you're lucky, a week of notice to dispose of all your personal property and your businesses. And they were incarcerated behind barbed wire with guns pointed inwards, not outwards. So, the euphemisms really belie the reality.
Did you have family? Do you have a personal experience with that horrific time?
Yes, to me, this is all very personal because both my mother and father's families were incarcerated. They were farm families. My mother's father lost his farm. My father's father was renting, but he lost all of his farm implements, the tractors, the horses, the trucks, the plows, etc. And they were all forcibly incarcerated in a camp called Poston.
And where was this?
And this was in the middle of the Sonoran Desert on an Indian reservation in the border between California and Arizona. My father was not part of this incarceration because he was a U.S. military soldier. My father had been drafted 6 months before Pearl Harbor, just as my mother's older brother had been drafted 6 months before Pearl Harbor, and they were both serving in the U.S. military while their families were incarcerated.
That must have felt just crazy.
It was. The injustice was... it was hard to imagine. My mother ended up having a second brother who volunteered during this time.
While he saw his family being put behind bars, essentially, he went to serve his country.
Both my mother's two brothers served in the European front in Germany and Italy in infantry, in combat. And my father eventually... was trained at Fort Snelling here in the cities to become a military intelligence linguist, and he served in the South Pacific.
So there's a pride in being able to serve our country, and yet at the same time there's a healing that needs to be made and a vigilance to not have this happen again.
Yes.
When you said it was a camp, it reminded me of our southern border and the children that we were told, well, they're just going to something like a camp. It doesn't look like a camp down there.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that has impressed us at the Eastside Freedom Library has been the energy and commitment of the Twin Cities Japanese American Citizens League to reach out to Muslim Americans of different ethnic backgrounds and to say, as Jews have said, never again.
Right.
And that what happened to Japanese Americans should never again happen to anyone in the United States or anyone really in the world. But if we don't know the history, we risk repeating it because we don't know what was done before. And in the work that I've done teaching adult immigrants, the version of American history that they've typically been exposed to, slavery itself is edited out of that story, and certainly the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II is also edited out of that story. So it's not that we want
we just neglect to share that piece.
Right. And that's to our own detriment if we don't know that history.
So the 23rd, what's happening that day?
On the February 23rd, we will be presenting a program. It'll be called Day of Remembrance, because this is a day that the Twin Cities chapter will honor and commemorate this event. And we'll be screening a DVD called Dave Tatsuno Movies and Memories. This during the incarceration, Japanese Americans were not allowed to have radios. They were not allowed to have cameras and anything that could be construed as a weapon, including a baseball bat.
Wow.
Dave Tatsuno was a successful UC Berkeley College educated, successful businessman from San Francisco, and he was able to subtly, secretly shoot rare footage of life in Topaz, which is one of these incarceration camps in Utah. And this camp held about 8,000 people. The significance of this this documentary is that it contains quite a bit of footage from his original movie called Topaz. And Topaz is part of the National Film Registry in the Library of Congress collection, and one of only 2 home movies to be included in the registry, the first of which was Zapruder's film on the assassination of JFK.
I'll tell you what. We're going to save a little bit more for our next segment. I'm going to leave another cliffhanger here, and we'll hear more about what's going to take place that night. And Peter will also be sharing about that remembrance and sharing, and so that we don't edit that part out.
That's right.
You're listening to Connections Radio Show here on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Stay with us for our last segment coming up in just a moment.
Being a true American means more than just baseball, blue jeans, and rock and roll. Being an American also means taking responsibility. So if you're a man turning 18, do your part. Register with Selective Service. It keeps you eligible for college loans, government jobs, and job training. Plus, it's the law. To register, log on to www.sss.gov or pick up a Selective Service registration card at any post office. Be a man and register.
We are given the gift of intuition on how to care for ourselves and our families. But too often we forsake that knowledge for the voice of authority. Green Tea Conversations is a radio show for people like you who are on a journey to take responsibility for their health and who want to play a more active role in their family's well-being. I'm your host, Candy Broffel, publisher of the Twin Cities edition of Natural Awakenings magazine, and I'm excited to bring Green Tea Conversations into your home. Join me every Sunday at 10 a.m. as I interview local experts straight from the pages of Natural Awakenings who will share progressive ideas and the latest natural approaches in nutrition, fitness, creative expression, personal growth, and sustainable living in a fun and informative way. Podcasts of the show are available anytime at naturaltwincities.com, am950radio.com, on iTunes, or anywhere you get your podcasts. So grab a cup of tea and join the conversations on Sundays at 10 a.m. as we awaken to natural health.
It was a day like any other when she walked into my office and told me about Fearless 5 Noir, a collection of 5 original short plays by 5 different writers and 5 directors, all on the same topic, noir. It just sounded so crazy that it was a hard pill to swallow, even for a hard-boiled detective like me. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I knew exactly where I could find them, too. They'd be at the Mounds Theater at 1029 Hudson Road in St. Paul. They'd be there Fridays and Saturdays, February 8th through the 23rd at 7:30 p.m. Tickets would be $10 if I planned ahead and ordered them online, or $15 at the door. She told me that I could always find more information at fearlesscomedyproductions.com. I took the job, but are you up for helping me with this case? I guess we'll find out at Fearless 5 Noir on February 8th through the 23rd at 7:30 p.m. at the Mounds Theater. Presented by Fearless Comedy Productions.
Connections Radio Show is all about tapping into our hardwired hunger to connect. We examine meaningful connections to ourselves, our community, and the world around us. By opening the door to innovative insights by a wide variety of interesting guests, we'll make the connections to something bigger than ourselves. Join me, Lori Fitz, your host of Connections Radio Show, and together we'll make the connections. Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. on AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Welcome back to Connections Radio Show. I'm Lori Fitz, and we have Peter Ratcliffe, who is our co-host today because it's the first Saturday of the month. And when it's the first Saturday, we celebrate and highlight the Eastside Freedom Library. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Lori. We're looking forward to a great month of activist scholarship and cultural work at the Eastside Freedom Library.
You celebrate every month with good art and good discussion and good community, and it's fun to be able to listen in to what things that you're planning for. And you always bring great guests. Share with us who the guests are that you, in case you've just joined us, Peter will share who he's brought this week.
Right. So earlier we heard from our partner Paul Finkelstein from the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra about their Tapestry project. Concerts that will be happening the weekends of February 15th and February 22nd, and programs we'll be doing at the Eastside Freedom Library on February 17th and February 19th. And then we've been hearing from Karen Tanaka-Lucas from the Twin Cities Japanese American Citizens League about their role in the program on February 19th, Remembering Home, and then the program that we're collaborating with them on the Day of Remembrance on February 23rd, Saturday night. And I just want to say, as we turn back to Karen, that one of the things that I've learned through the activist scholarship of the field oral history is that memory is not like a file cabinet. You don't just open a drawer and there's all of the information. And I think that the construction of memory in the present is a hard, difficult, and necessary job. And I think that this Tapestry project at the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra and the annual celebration of the Day of Remembrance by the Twin Cities Japanese American Citizens League are both doing the hard work of helping us to remember so that we don't repeat the mistakes that we've made in the past. So I'd like to turn back to Karen and get a little bit more about Dave Tatsumo and his amazing movie Topaz, one of only 2 home movies in the Library of Congress collection. So you want to tell us a little more, Karen, about what we're going to do on the 23rd?
Sure. The 23rd, in addition to the screening of the movie, will feature Sally Sudo, Hannah Semba, and Lucy Kirihara, who are former incarcerees from the incarceration camps during World War II, and they'll talk about their memories and even present some artistic artifacts.
Were they located in the West Coast?
Most of the camps were actually inland, as far inland as Arkansas.
Really?
But a lot of them were in like Arizona, Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, but pretty bleak, isolated areas of the country. And I don't think most Americans knew about them at the time. the reason we selected this video, unlike other videos that we've presented with our Day of Remembrance programs in the past, which have been about social injustice, the suffering and loss, the racism, the constitutional crisis, this video is different because it talks more about a man and a community surviving, trying to stay productive and creative, and making a home for 3.5 years in a prison.
Wow. Now, did folks, when they were sent to these prisons, did they end up going back to their original homes, or did some of them stay near where they had been sent?
It was kind of frightening for people to go back to their original homes. And like one of my grandfathers, he had nothing. He had no job. He had no place to go. He had no money. He was like 64, 65 years old. And they relied a lot on extended family to help. But most of them did go back to the West Coast states. Some did relocate. Areas like Chicago, Minneapolis, St. Paul was a big one. Minnesota was very receptive. And people have had very kind comments about the residents of Minnesota. The School for Military Intelligence Language was here in Minnesota because it was the only state willing to take Japanese Americans for training for the war. So you will see now a community, not a large community, but a community of Japanese Americans, many of whom are descendants of those military intelligence linguists who were impressed with the warmth of our state.
It will be a wonderful night.
It certainly will. I hope everybody listening will come and join us. Yeah.
I will be there.
Great.
I am looking
Great.
forward. This will be a very... Again, the Eastside Freedom Library, whether it's a play reading or a film or music or a panel discussion, there's always something powerful. So thank you. Thank you both for joining us today to share with us about the events coming up. I do want to let our listeners know that we do have some free tickets to the Park Square, which also is in partnership with the Eastside Freedom Library, so another partner of theirs. Wanted to let you know it's going to be featured on Facebook for the Connections Radio Show. It's Antigone. The tickets are for 2 tickets for Friday, February 15th, starting at 7:30. Just go to the Facebook page, give us a like, and send me a message, and you may win 2 tickets to Antigone. So I just want to get that in before the end of the hour. Share with us just a few more things that are happening at the Eastside Freedom Library in February.
Well, we have some really great labor events coming up, and I just want to mention those quickly. Monday night, the 18th of February, we will have a panel discussion on the labor movement and the fight for $15 an hour. And we'll have speakers on the panel who are both from within the labor movement and from within the movement for $15. On the Wednesday night of that week, the 20th, we will be screening the movie just made for TPT2, Made in St. Paul. It's a movie about the history of the Ford plant and focuses on a lot of interviews with workers and retired workers who had worked at Ford. And then on Thursday night, the 21st, we're going to have the author Eric Loomis and his new book, 10 Strikes That Shaped American History. So a week of labor history activities mixed in with all of this. Somehow it's all connected.
It is, because we're on Connections Radio Show. You can check out the website at the eastsidefreedomlibrary.org. Also check out
thespco.org/tapestry.